Let's look at the poem Oranges by Gary Soto. The first stanza says, "The first time I walked with a girl, I was 12, cold, and weighted down with two oranges in my pocket." So he's talking about the first time he ever walked with a girl. He was 12 years old, it's cold outside, and he has two oranges that are kind of heavy in his jacket. Next stanza, December, frost cracking beneath my steps, my breath before me, then gone, as I walked toward her house, the one whose porch light burned yellow night and day in any weather. So this part of the poem talks about it's cold outside. It's the month of December. He can feel the frost breaking, the ice breaking beneath his steps, and he's also talking about his breath. How at during when it's cold outside, how your breath kind of looks, and he can see it in front of him, and he's also a little bit nervous as he walks toward her house. It's he describes her house as the one that has the porch light that's on all the time in any weather. A dog barked at me until she came out pulling at her gloves, face bright with rouge. So he knocks on the door, and the dog is barking, and she comes out and she's putting her gloves on, and she has on makeup. Her face is all bright and pretty with makeup. It says, "I smiled, touched her shoulder, and led her down the street across a used car lot and a line of newly planted trees." So they're walking along the street. He has her hand on her shoulder, and they walk in front of a car lot, a used car lot, and a line of some just trees, some just planted trees in the neighborhood, until we're breathing before a drugstore. We entered the tiny bell, bringing a sales lady down a narrow aisle of goods. So they get to a drugstore, and they're a little bit out of breath. They're maybe tired and cold, and they ring a little bell, and the sales lady comes from um, behind some aisles. Stanza 25 says, or line 25 says, "I turned to the candies, tiered like bleachers, and asked what she wanted. Light in her eyes, a smile starting at the corners of her mouth. I fingered a nickel in my pocket, and when she lifted a chocolate that cost a dime, I didn't say anything. I took the nickel from my pocket, then an orange, and set them quietly on the counter." So this part of the poem talks about they're in the store, and he's looking at candies, and then he looks at her and asks her what she wants. And she begins to smile really big, and her eyes kind of light up. So she's happy. And she points to and picks up one of the chocolate, but it cost a dime, and he only has a nickel in his pocket. So he takes out the nickel and puts it on the counter, and he also takes out one of the oranges that's in his jacket pocket, and he puts that on the counter, and he doesn't say anything. He just puts them quietly on the counter. He continues, "When I looked up, the lady's eyes met mine and held them, knowing very well what it was all about." So the lady, the sales lady at the counter, looked at him and she looked at her, and they didn't say anything. She just quietly took the orange and the nickel without saying that he doesn't have any money. She knew he didn't have any money, enough money for the candies, but she didn't want to embarrass him. So she just took the orange and the candy and the nickel, and she gave him the candy. Outside, a few cars hissing past, fog hanging like old coats between the trees. I took my girl's hand in mine for 2 blocks, then released it to let her unwrap the chocolate. So they went back outside in the cold. And so there are cars that are passing by really fast, and it's a gray, dreary December day, and it's foggy. And he takes his girl's hand, and they walk for 2 blocks, and they're hand in hand. And then he lets her hand go so that she can unwrap and eat her chocolate. I peeled my orange that was so bright against the gray December that from some distance someone might have thought I was making a fire in my hands. So he takes his hand out of hers so she can eat, unwrap her chocolate and eat her chocolate bar. And he peels his orange. And the color of the orange is so bright against the gray, dreary day in December that he says someone that's looking from far away would think that it's a fire. It's so bright.